The elevator to the 21st floor groaned like it knew what I was about to do. Each ding at every level felt louder than the last. I held the envelope in one hand, the black moleskin notebook in the other. Hadn't cracked that thing open in over a decade. Used to live in it. Diagrams, timelines, little post-it notes folded between pages. It smelled like dust and ambition. The doors opened to the executive wing of Hartley Dynamics. All glass, chrome, and that sterile silence rich people mistake for importance. I walked past the receptionist, didn't even make eye contact. She knew why I was there. Doug Vexler didn't look up when I walked in, just flicked his eyes toward me, then back down to his iPad. Probably playing that online poker game he always swore was market research. I walked up and placed the envelope on his desk. Didn't say a word. He finally looked up, still chewing on a toothpick. He opened it like he was reading his mail, not like his career was about to catch fire. When he finished, he leaned back, snorted, then let out that barking laugh he always did when he thought he was the smartest guy in the room. "You're quitting at your age? Where you gonna go, Matt? Yoga retreat?" I didn't smile. "There's a second document in the envelope." He arched an eyebrow and pulled out the second sheet. Watched the smirk drain from his face. "You signed that in April of 2021, I said. "Non-compete waiver. Covers any project developed during unpaid innovation cycles." He set the paper down and stared at it like it had betrayed him. "I remember you made a joke about it," I added. "Said it was for HR, not engineers." Doug sat back in his chair, shaking his head. "This some kind of stunt? You planning to make noise?" "No, just planning to start over." He tried to smile again, but it didn't quite work. "Come on, Matt, you're what, 48, 50, 51. "Exactly. You don't build empires at 51. I held up the moleskin, the same one he used to mock in meetings. "This isn't a resignation letter, Doug. It's a map. You just never cared to read it." His eyes flicked toward the notebook, then away. He didn't know what was in there. Had no clue how long I'd been keeping receipts, before the IPO, before the acquisition, before his first yacht and that dumb TEDx talk where he called himself a systems philosopher. I turned and walked out. He didn't stop me. I didn't expect him to. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I flipped open the notebook to the first dog-eared page. There it was, a tiny triangle diagram and a label in the margin. Load Logic Priority Stack, Q2 Draft, March 2021. In his handwriting underneath, "Cool sketch, get this into dev." I smiled to myself. He had no idea he'd just watched the house of cards start to fall. I didn't drive home. I sat in my truck, engine off, fourth level of the parking garage, heat bleeding in through the windshield, like it wanted to finish what Doug had started. The moleskin sat on my lap, heavy in a way paper shouldn't be. I flipped it open. First page, MIT Systems Engineering Fellowship. Decision due March 11th, 6 years ago. My thumb hovered over the date, like I could rewind time with pressure. I remembered exactly where I was when I wrote it. At my kitchen counter, half a mug of stale coffee next to a blinking cursor. The offer had come in late February. Full ride, housing, DART research funding. They wanted me to help pilot an energy load simulation system tied to public infrastructure, what I would have killed to work on as a student. Doug had smirked when I told him. "MIT's a museum," he'd said, leaning back in that ridiculous standing desk chair he imported from Norway. "You're already building the future here." He tapped his temple like he was imparting wisdom instead of gaslighting me. "You don't need another degree. You need a stake." He promised me the systems lead role within a year, said I'd be signing off on every model, every line of optimization logic. "Hell, your name will be on patents before you can spell thermoelectric." I laughed at the time, thought it was a compliment. I turned MIT down the next day, called them from a gas station, if I remember right. The woman on the other end was kind about it, said I had a bright future either way. I hung up and sat there for 10 minutes, chewing on a granola bar and telling myself I made the right call. For a while, I really believed I had. I built that platform's energy logic from scratch, all of it. From predictive route mapping to thermal spillover management. When the data center had its first load failure, it was me who sat on the floor at 2 a.m., rerouting signal flow with my laptop balanced on a vending machine. I missed birthdays. Bergmeister. canceled vacations, spent Thanksgiving in the server room, once with a folding chair and a pack of jerky. Then came the investor roundtable. It was supposed to be my moment. I'd prepped the slide deck, designed the demo with live input capture, even practiced explaining the interface to a room full of Stanford dropouts with egos bigger than their liquidity. Doug showed up 30 minutes late. No tie, just that smug, casual arrogance he wore like cologne. And when he started talking, I waited for him to mention me, to say we had built this, that our team had made it work. But he didn't. He said I built this, meaning himself. He used my phrases, my examples. He stood there and described constraint layering like he'd thought of it in the shower that morning. And I watched those investors nod along, grinning, jotting down notes like they were witnessing the next jobs. When it was over, he clapped me on the back like I was the intern who ran the clicker. "Solid work," he said, grinning. "Big win for the company." That night I went home and opened the notebook. Same one sitting on my lap now. I flipped to the sketch that started it all. An energy load cycle shaped like an open spiral, not a closed loop. My handwriting, my initials. Dated 2 years before he ever called it his, I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. Not because of the lie, but because I realized something worse. He didn't just take credit, he believed it. Somewhere along the way, Doug had convinced himself he built the damn thing. Like repetition had rewired history. Like standing next to the architect made him one. I closed the notebook, rested it on the passenger seat. The sun was going down now, streaking the garage wall in gold and shadow. I had spent years giving everything to a man who couldn't tell the difference between ownership and proximity. Not anymore. This time, the receipts had timestamps. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the same place I used to sketch out system diagrams on the back of old receipts, waiting for pasta to boil. It was past midnight. The house was quiet. Fridge humming, dog snoring near the couch. I should have gone to bed. But instead, I opened my laptop. There was a folder I hadn't touched in months, maybe longer. Core Dev H. That H was for Hollis, not Hartley. I made sure of that back when naming things meant something. The folder loaded slowly, like it was waking up from hibernation. When it finally opened, I saw hundreds of files. Flowcharts, .code, snapshots, module iterations, folders labeled things like predictive, load, beta 2, reroute, logic, test, final, MH opt, path, sim, v1. It was all there. Every piece of the platform's backbone. I clicked through flow diagrams that I hadn't looked at since 2020, and my own notes hit me like a gut punch. At the bottom of each file, I'd tagged myself with MH and the date, just like I always had, not for credit, but for version tracking, and now that was my proof. I clicked open a voice memo labeled 4:03 a.m. load or debug log. My own voice crackled through the speakers, hoarse and flat with exhaustion. Load issue resolved, modifying convergence sequence, rerun plan for 7 a.m., add failsafe to prevent stack overload on loopback. There was a clatter in the background. Sounded like me bumping into the vending machine. I hit pause, just sat there for a second, breathing in the silence. That was the night the whole system came together, when the logic finally held under full load simulation. I remembered it because the lights had flickered in the hallway, and I thought I'd taken down a floor of the building by accident, all time-stamped, all mine. The code, the audio, the annotated screenshots, even the whiteboard photo I'd emailed to Doug at midnight that showed the original spiral root logic, the one he later called his signature insight in an interview. I should have been angry, but what I felt was older than that. Tired out cold, like someone had been stealing from my house for years, and I'd only now found the inventory list. I was still staring at the folder when a new email hit my inbox. The subject line practically blinked. High priority. Draft. Do not forward. From Sasha R. Toe, Matthew Hollis. Sent 12:37 a.m. I frowned. Sasha was one of the junior executive assistants. Sharp, quiet, always knew more than she let on. I opened the message. No body text, just an attachment. The mind behind Hartley Dynamics. Ghost Draft. Author, Douglas Vexler. Intended publication, TechView Monthly. I opened it, Chapter 3 jumped out at me. 3 years to build a future. I read the first paragraph, and something in my stomach flipped. He wasn't just referencing my work. He was quoting me, sentences lifted straight from old internal docs I'd written, lines from Slack threads, word for word. Even a pull quote at the top of the chapter. Energy doesn't just move, it negotiates. Our job is to make sure the negotiation ends in balance. That was mine. Doug had read it off a whiteboard in my old office back in 22 and laughed. Too poetic, he'd said. Now it was a pull quote in his article. I kept scrolling. There it was, a full-page image of the spiral load diagram. Cropped tighter, color shifted, cleaned up, but still mine. I could see the little glitch where I'd messed up the curve on the third arc and tried to fix it mid-draw. My fingers twitched. At first I thought he was trying to bury me, keep me quiet. But this wasn't erasure. He was repackaging me, taking everything I had done, every late night, every handwritten diagram, every fix, every bug I squashed, and dressing it up in his voice, his suit, his smirk. He was going to publish it, call it vision, call it strategy, call it his. Before anyone had a chance to remember mine, I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. Doug wasn't just stealing, he was building a monument out of pieces of me. Only this time, I wasn't the only one watching. Buried in the back of the notebook, behind a yellowed to-do list and a torn corner of an old project sketch, was a business card I hadn't looked at in years. Smooth black finish. Silver lettering. No logo, no tagline, just confidence printed in 12-point type. Dr. Lenora Klein, CTO, Faraday Nex. When you're ready to work where they see you, call me. I remembered the day she gave it to me. Industry mixer, back in 21. I'd given an impromptu explanation of modular load splitting over a lukewarm whiskey. She listened like she was downloading me in real time, then just handed over the card. "You're doing brilliant work," she said, then paused. "Shame it's under someone else's name." I never called. At the time, I still believed in the Hartley pipeline. I thought the credit would come eventually, that if I just kept building, Doug would eventually step aside and let the work speak for itself. It never did. But now I had no boss, no badge, no illusions left. I snapped a photo of the card and emailed her before I could talk myself out of it. Subject, still interested? Body, if the offer still stands, I'd like to talk. She replied in under 20 minutes, tomorrow. Evan did his AM, my office, bring what matters. No small talk, no questions. Just a time and a line I couldn't stop replaying in my head. Faraday Nex wasn't like Hartley Dynamics. There were no glass sculptures in the lobby, no three-piece suits gliding across polished marble. The building smelled like cedar and ozone, like real work was happening behind every closed door. Reception waved me through without a badge. "Dr. Klein's expecting you." I found her at the end of a quiet hallway, surrounded by whiteboards that looked like they'd actually been used. She stood when I walked in, extended a hand, firm, steady. "Matthew Hollis," she said, like it was a name that mattered. "Took you long enough." I handed her a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Core logic. Internal tests, voice logs, copies of original design trees, and a copy of the draft article Doug was planning to publish." She didn't sit, just plugged it in and started clicking through files right there in front of me. Her eyes narrowed. She recognized what she was seeing, not just the content, but the authorship. "Your structure's cleaner than theirs," she said. "Even under load." She stopped on a folder labeled Variant 3Cs. Shelved. A model I'd never submitted to Hartley. I hadn't trusted them with it. It was too ambitious, too raw, but I'd backed it up, out of habit. A better compression routine for variable inputs, meant for smart grid forecasting. That one was never deployed, I said, still in prototype, not even fully modeled. She opened it anyway, clicked through diagrams, stared at the signature tucked in the metadata, then she said something I wasn't expecting. "We received this schematic 2 months ago." My stomach turned. "What?" She nodded. "Came in through a leak. Doug's name was on the sender metadata, but this proves it wasn't his." I stared at the screen. The file. my file, with my routing logic, my framework. The one I never showed anyone at Hartley. He must have pulled it from a shared drive. I never submitted it. Len closed the laptop. "You've got everything you need to burn them down," she said quietly. I didn't reply right away. I hadn't planned on burning anything. I thought I'd just walk away and let the dust settle. But then I thought about the article draft, the way Doug had quoted me like I was already dead, the spiral sketch, the fake smile at the investor meeting, the missed birthdays, the sleepless nights, and the way he'd looked at me when I quit, amused, like I'd never make it out there on my own. Len could see it on my face. She smiled, small, sharp. "Just say the word," she said. And for the first time in a long time, I did. "Let's light the match." The email came at 9:03 a.m. Sharp. Subject: cease and desist. Unauthorized use of proprietary systems. From legalvoltriongroup.com to m.hollis, faradaynex.ai. I didn't even have to read it to know what it was. Doug moved fast when he felt cornered, fast and loud, like a dog barking behind a locked gate. I skimmed the body of the message. Accusations of IP theft, breach of contract, misuse of confidential information. The usual scare tactics dressed up in lawyer speak. I opened my reply window and dragged in a file from my desktop. A high-res scan of a contract Doug had signed back in 2021, Clause 14B, highlighted in yellow. Innovations developed during non-billable time, or independent work sessions, remain the intellectual property of the originating engineer. My name, his signature, legal timestamp, document ID. That clause had been my idea, a safeguard no one else at Hartley bothered to negotiate. Doug had called it cute. I guess he didn't think I'd ever use it. I hit send. 10 minutes later, I heard laughter down the hall. Len's legal team was reading the same email chain. One of them leaned back and actually clapped. "They're bluffing," she said. "We've got receipts." But that wasn't the part that made me pause. It was the next thing, the text message that came from a number I didn't recognize. No name, just a string of digits and a short, blunt line. "Check Q2 version logs." I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. Just silence, but something about it felt real, urgent. I opened my backup drive and navigated to the archived Hartley Dev environment. Buried inside the Q2 release folder was a file labeled version log, backup or 7 text, the timestamp, April 17th, 10:21 a.m. I clicked. Line 37, routing schematic update committed by M. Hollis. I stared at it, heart pounding. That schematic was mine, the same one that later showed up in Doug's article draft. The Comet record proved I had uploaded it before Doug ever touched it, before any edits, before he stamped his name across the whole thing, and now someone was telling me that Hartley was scrubbing these logs. I checked the current live version, same Comet, but the author name was gone, blank. As if no one had written it, just system admin. They were rewriting history. I sat back, trying to keep my hands from shaking, not from fear, from rage. This wasn't just damage control. They weren't just trying to freeze me out. They were trying to erase me completely. Doug didn't just want me gone. He wanted the story to go on like I was never there. Another message came through. Same number. Jason P. says he left breadcrumbs. Look in Q2 notes folder. April 12th draft. Jason P. I knew that name. Ex-Voltrion Legal. He'd left a few months before I quit. Always had a nervous smile, but a sharp memory. I dug into the folder. April 12th, pre-release version. Internal memo from engineering to legal for pre-approval. I opened it. There it was. Routing schematic optimization. Credit M. Hollis. My name. Clear as day. Saved in the metadata. Logged in the file history. I didn't know why Jason was helping me. Maybe he saw what was coming and wanted no part of it. Maybe this was his way of evening the scale. Either way, he'd slip me proof. They were changing files. Rewriting authorship. Systematically removing every trace of me from the very thing I had built. I forwarded the memo and the commit logs to Len and her legal team with one line. "They're scrubbing. Let's go loud." Then I turned off my phone, because this wasn't a cease and desist anymore. It was war. 6 days later, the cracks started showing. It began with a string of cryptic posts on an industry forum, just whispers at first. Users from Region 2 complaining about weird fluctuations in predictive load balancing. A Reddit thread popped up overnight. Hartley logic buckling under demand. One commenter posted a blurry screenshot of a system dashboard stuck in a feedback loop. No autocorrect, no failsafe, just rising numbers and a frozen timer. Then came the Midwest grid. That one was louder. Power reroutes delayed by 6 seconds. A lifetime in dynamic energy regulation. A minor blackout in Peoria made the local news. Hartley Dynamics' name was buried in the third paragraph. But anyone who knew systems could smell it. Something under the hood wasn't doing its job. Then I got the message. Did you build the heartbeat module? It came from an old back-end engineer I used to work with. Ellis Chen, a quiet guy, brilliant, lived on Red Bull and peanut M&Ms. He'd never messaged me directly before. I replied, simple. Why? He sent a screenshot. System log, a fatal error. Missing module, mHollis opt v3.9. I stared at the screen like it was a ghost because that was my signature, buried in the version name. I used to joke about leaving little clues in the builds, breadcrumbs no one else would recognize. Hollis opt v3.9 was part of the core timing logic. The heartbeat. It wasn't just another module, it was the metronome that kept the entire system in sync under load. They'd rebranded everything since I left. Scrubbed names, changed headers, even slapped new logos on the UI. But under all that marketing polish, they hadn't touched the logic. They never understood how it worked. And now, they'd deleted the heartbeat. Probably thought it was redundant. Or maybe they didn't want my name lingering in the build any longer. But without it, the system wasn't just broken. It was blind. I didn't respond to Ellis. Just shut my laptop and leaned back in my chair. That module was never supposed to be public-facing. It wasn't listed in documentation. It didn't even show up in standard audits. But I'd built it into the foundation because I knew how fragile Hartley's upper logic was. Stacked too high, too fast, too proud, and now it was all unraveling. By noon the next day, my phone was lighting up. Missed calls, emails, even a voicemail from someone on the exec team who once said, I wasn't leadership material. They wanted a meeting. They wanted to talk. I didn't answer. I was standing in the kitchen at Faraday, pouring myself a cup of burnt coffee, when Len walked in, holding a printout of a press inquiry. Regional regulators are asking for Hartley's load stability protocols, she said, waving the paper slightly. They can't provide them. I nodded. Because they never understood them. She smiled like she'd been waiting to hear that. They're trying to rewrite their own legacy, I added. But the system still remembers me. Len tapped the paper. So does the code. That afternoon, our dev team ran a trace on publicly available Hartley builds. The original heartbeat signature, mHollis opt v3.9, was still hard-coded into 10 separate modules across the Midwest grid, my initials, my versioning. They'd dressed the code up in new clothes, but underneath, my name was still there. Blinking, beating, they couldn't rewrite it because they never understood what it did. They couldn't replace it because they never noticed it was holding the structure up. And now, it was gone. Screenshots started circulating on Twitter. One engineer posted, fatal error, missing Hollis module, LMAO. Guess she really was the heart of it. I didn't respond, didn't need to. I watched as the system hiccuped again in Region 7. Another missed reroute, another headline buried in the business section, and through all of it, I sat still. Calm, quiet. Because Doug hadn't just underestimated me. He'd built his entire empire on top of architecture he never understood. And now that I was gone, it was collapsing. One invisible beat at a time. The Global Tech Summit in Boston was the kind of event that made executives feel immortal. Spotlights, branded lanyards, overpriced coffee and buzzwords bouncing off every wall. I wasn't planning to go. I'd told myself I was done playing that game. But then I got the invite. No sender name, just a forwarded calendar link with a front row ticket, seat 4B. The subject line read, direct line of sight. I booked a train that afternoon. The auditorium was all polish and ego, rows of the same recycle suits, white sneakers, and neural net haircuts. Doug was scheduled to give the keynote, the future of predictive energy, Hartley's vision for tomorrow. It was printed across a 30-foot LED screen behind the stage. I sat in my assigned seat, fourth row, center aisle. The lights dimmed, and Doug strutted out like he was launching a rocket instead of sinking a ship. He still wore that signature half smile, like he knew something we didn't. Same perfectly groomed stubble, same fake humility tucked behind designer glasses. He took a breath and started talking. The world demands smarter systems, adaptive frameworks, human-guided AI that doesn't just react, but learns, predicts, evolves. He clicked to the first slide. System logic overview, Hartley dynamics, core layer, and right away I knew. He didn't understand it, not just because he fumbled over constraint stacking, but because I recognized the expression, that thin look behind the eyes of a man reciting someone else's lines. He mumbled a few more buzzwords and switched slides. Underneath the architecture diagram, I could still make out the original file tag, mhload rev7, my shorthand. I used it in every core layer design since 2019. He didn't even crop it out. And then, from somewhere behind me, a voice cut through the room. Didn't Hollis design this system? A pause. Long, too long. Doug froze for half a second, like someone had unplugged his brain. Then came the murmurs. She demoed this at MIT. Her name's in the version logs. I think she was the lead. It rippled through the room. First curiosity, then suspicion. All those clean suits and badges, all those LinkedIn bios full of vision and synergy. They started to tilt in their seats. Tilt toward me. Doug stuttered something about collaborative development, but it was too late. Someone pulled up an old video. The internal demo I gave back in 22. Same diagram, same spiral logic. My voice explaining how the load route adjusted dynamically using pulse indexing. It was undeniable. He tried to shift to the next slide, but his voice cracked. Let's talk about implementation pathways. He couldn't fake the math, couldn't fake the logic behind it. And without a script, he was exposed. A man surrounded by mirrors, finally seeing himself. I stood up. Not to speak, not to confront him, just to leave. As I walked up the aisle, the applause started. But it wasn't for Doug. It was for me. I didn't wave, didn't smile, just kept walking, past the stage, past the exit doors, past the giant banner with Doug's face on it. The same crowd that used to applaud him now looked through him. And I hadn't said a word, not a word. Still, I'd won the room. 2 days after Boston, I sat across from Dana Kessler, head of intellectual property at Faraday Nex. She was sharp, black blazer, short hair, eyes like scanners. No small talk, just business. We need proof, she said, fingers steepled, eyes locked on mine. Before Doug filed the patent. Something clear, dated yours. I'd brought a cardboard box with me, the kind people use to pack up offices when they get fired or finally walk away. Mine had a Sharpie label on the top flap, handoff notes, archive 2. I hadn't touched it since the spring of 2021. Inside, one spiral-bound notebook, yellowed pages, oil-smudged corners, stickers peeling off the cover. It was my old field sketch log, the one I kept next to my terminal for every system tweak, every failed iteration, every midnight breakthrough. I slid it across the table. Dana opened it carefully, flipped past a dozen half-legible entries until she landed on the one I'd flagged with a sticky note. April 5th, 2021. Handoff correction, V2, critical schema rework for load transfer imbalance. A full schematic, labeled, signed, dated. She stared at it for a while, then looked up. We'll need to verify the paper, the ink, the writing pressure. Handwriting analysis. You're okay with that? Do what you have to, I said. She nodded and passed the notebook off to an aide, who disappeared with it immediately. We'll also subpoena metadata from the original patent, she added, already tapping out an internal request on her tablet. If they altered your name out of the draft, we'll find it. I should have felt anxious, but I didn't. I'd spent so long proving myself in whispers, quiet contributions, late nights, explaining my own work to people who only wanted to strip it for talking points. I was done whispering. That afternoon, Dana called me back into her office. They verified it. The notebook's legit, Paper was manufactured in late 2020. Ink pressure and handwriting match your employment badge signature. She turned her screen toward me. We filed the prior art claim 10 minutes ago. It's public, it's loud, and it's permanent. The document on the screen was titled Prior Art Submission. Hollis v. Hartley Dynamics. My name was the first thing listed. Then her email pinged. She opened it, brow arching. Well, that didn't take long. It was from a former Hartley engineer, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Attached was an internal patent draft. Unedited .raw. First line, primary inventor, M. Hollis. Second line, code developer, D. Vexler. My breath caught for a second. Where'd they get this? I asked. They didn't say, but it's time-stamped. Original creation date predates Doug's final filing by 10 days. Dana leaned back in her chair and smiled. This isn't just your design anymore, it's evidence. She closed her laptop and stood. Congratulations, Matthew. You're officially the ghost in the machine. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. And I'd just gotten my name back. In ink, not code. The email came in at 2:17 a.m. from a name I hadn't seen in years. Subject, you should know from gcooperedacted.com. It was Gavin, one of the original engineers on the Optish 2 platform. Brilliant mind, nervous talker. Used to triple-check every pull request before hitting submit. His message was short. They made me remove your name from the Opt2 filing. I saved the real version. It's attached, thought you'd want it. The PDF was clean, time-stamped. Authored by me, Gavin's note in the metadata. Original pre-redact, stored offline, quiet insurance. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because I hadn't seen it coming, but because someone still inside had the guts to hold on to the truth. By morning, the story had cracked wide open. Media outlets started circling the prior art filing. The words, unauthorized patent, code theft, and intellectual erasure were all over the headlines. My name trended for the first time in my life. Who built? It, Uoshidar, credit, the builder. O. M. Hollis was. Here. Some posts had screenshots from the summit. A few even showed me walking out during Doug's keynote, framed like it was a mic drop moment. I didn't correct them, let people believe what they wanted. By noon, reporters were outside Faraday's office. Len called an internal meeting to make sure I was comfortable going public. I told her the truth. I'm not hiding anymore. That afternoon, I got a call, block number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Doug, please, he said, like the word physically hurt him. I need your notes. I don't understand half the framework. It's falling apart. I could hear the panic in his voice. Like he finally realized the foundation wasn't something he could bluff his way through. I told you back then, I said calmly. This wasn't just code. Silence. Then, I'm begging you, Matt. Just walk me through the stability sequence. I can fix it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat. I don't ghostwrite anymore. I ended the call. The next industry summit was 3 weeks later. Bigger venue, more press. As I walked up to the main stage entrance, I saw the signage posted beside the door. Keynote, Matthew Hollis, CTO, Faraday. Next topic, the human signature and system design. Below that, in smaller lettering, panelist, Doug Vexler. Status, pending availability. I stood there for a moment, reading it twice. Pending availability. That was the same phrase he used when he ghosted my promotion back in 2022. We'll revisit your title pending team growth and availability. Funny how things circle back. I walked through the doors to a room 3/4 full. Some old faces, a lot of new ones. A few whispering as I passed. One person clapped when I reached the podium, then another, and then it spread. But I didn't smile for it. I pulled up my presentation. Slide 1. What happens when you build without understanding the architect? No credits, no ego, just facts. Because here's the truth. The man who once needed me to sound smart couldn't even finish a slide without me. And the only thing missing from their new model was me, and that was enough to sink it. The envelope was plain. No return address. Just my name, typed, not printed, on the front in a font that tried too hard to be polite. Inside was a letter, handwritten. The loops in the D's and the stiff corners of the T's gave it away before I even reached the signature. Doug. I convinced myself the face mattered more than the engine. I told myself that vision and presentation were enough. But without you, there was no fire in the machine. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Not out of bitterness, I'd already burned that down. It was something else, like finding your own name carved into the back of a wall you helped build years later, after they painted over it 10 times. I folded the letter, tucked it in the back of my drawer. Not for sentiment, just closure. Then I opened the folder on my desk. Project Hollis, AI1. The schematic was simple, deceptively so. Real-time load forecasting, AI augmented routing logic, adaptive failure response. Every part of it clean, modular, transparent. Not like the mess we'd buried under politics at Hartley. This was different. It wasn't built for applause or investor decks, or some keynote speaker who didn't understand how voltages cascade under shift loads. It was built to work. The Faraday board had signed off 2 days earlier. Lenora had slid the signed approval memo across the table with a grin. Let's build something they can't erase. Now, in bold letters at the top of the first page, Matthew Hollis, Chief Systems Architect, approved for implementation Q4. No co-authors, no marketing consultant edits, just my name. And honestly, I didn't even need that anymore, because the truth was, I wasn't chasing credit. Not now, not after everything. I was the credit. The fire they tried to contain. I carried it with me, always had, even when I was the silent name in the logs, even when I was rewriting broken code at 2 a.m. with jerky in my lap. Doug finally admitted what I always knew. And maybe that would have mattered more if I hadn't already moved on. The next system won't need me to defend it in boardrooms or fight for a spot on the slide deck. It'll speak for itself, and it won't need an audience to survive. It'll just work.